The lights inside the prison clicked off one by one, leaving the long concrete hallway in a strange blue darkness. Phones on the guards' belts began buzzing with error messages. A radio in the watchtower hissed and went silent. In the middle of all this, 3 men in standard-issue khaki uniforms walked calmly as if they had expected this blackout for months. Their footsteps made soft echoes. Their faces were steady, their eyes focused. These 3 men were not just inmates. They were high-ranking members of MS-13, and on this night they were using the prison like a command center, sending out secret instructions to people on the outside. Orders to move drugs across highways. Orders to plan attacks. Orders that would travel from cell to street within minutes. At that very moment, in cities miles away, phones buzzed in pockets. Messages flashed on screens. People read the orders and got ready to follow them. And all those instructions, all that movement, all that planning, came from behind the prison walls. Inside the prison, a guard named Ryan rushed toward the control room. His shoes slapped the floor loudly. Something was wrong, very wrong. He reached the big steel door and saw that the digital locks were dead. There was only a low hum, like a tired breath coming from the wires. When he looked through the narrow window, he froze. A man inside, an inmate, was sitting in the control room chair. Not a guard. Not staff. An inmate. The man turned slowly and looked right at Ryan through the glass. His eyes were calm, too calm. On the desk in front of him was a prison phone, its small screen glowing softly. Someone had rewired the controls. Someone had shut down the lights. Someone had given MS-13 full control over the system for just long enough to do something big, something dangerous, something no one saw coming. Before Ryan could shout for help, a loud alarm burst through the hallway, a sound unlike the normal sirens. This one was sharper, faster, almost panicked. The inmate inside stood up from the chair, placed the phone down gently, and walked toward the side door that led deeper into the restricted hallway. Ryan backed away. His heart pounded. What were they doing? How were inmates running the prison systems? What was happening outside while the prison stood nearly blind? Then, from somewhere in the building, a giant bang shook the floor, a power relay exploding from the strain of being tampered with. The hallway flickered with a weak flash of red emergency lights. And just as Ryan reached for his backup radio, a voice whispered behind him. Too late. The chapter stops there, right in the middle of the blackout, right as MS-13 has taken control of one of the most secure areas in the prison, right as the outside world begins moving to their command. But to understand how this even happened, we need to go back to the beginning, long before the blackout, long before the alarms, long before MS-13 learned how to build a secret empire inside U.S. prisons. This story starts many years earlier, when the gang was smaller inside prison walls and still trying to figure out how to survive. Back then, the prison felt like a world with strict rules. Tall walls. Heavy steel doors. Guards walking with serious faces. Inmates following schedules like clockwork, breakfast at dawn, yard time in the afternoon, lockdown in the evening. But even with all those rules, there were cracks in the system. And MS-13 had learned to see every crack, every weakness, every blind spot. The first thing they learned was communication. It started small. Whispered messages. Tiny pieces of paper. A short, harmless-looking phone call. Then they learned how to pass notes from cell to cell without guards seeing. They learned how to make simple signals, taps on metal pipes, coughs during roll call, coded words in the laundry room. These little signals helped them grow trust inside a place where trust was rare. A young inmate named Lewis was one of the first to understand how important communication could be. He had quiet eyes, always watching. He noticed which guards walked slowly and which walked fast, which ones checked each cell carefully and which ones didn't look too closely. Lewis never caused trouble. He acted like he just wanted to serve his time and go home. But inside his head, he was learning how the prison moved, how it breathed. One afternoon in the yard, while men lifted weights and others walked in slow circles, an older MS-13 member named Thomas sat beside Lewis on a bench. "You pay attention," Thomas said. "I try," Lewis answered. Thomas nodded. "Good. Because eyes can open doors." That was the beginning. As months passed, Lewis became one of the people MS-13 trusted with small tasks. Nothing violent. Just messages. Observing routines. Learning schedules. It was simple work, at first. Then came the day when a guard pulled Lewis aside. The guard's name was Carter. He had tired eyes and seemed nervous about something. "You work in laundry, right?" Carter asked. "Yes," Lewis said carefully. "I need a favor," the guard said. "In return, I'll make things easier for you." Better work hours. Less trouble. Lewis didn't answer right away. He knew what it meant when a guard asked for a private favor. Something wasn't right. Something might get him into danger. What kind of favor? Lewis asked. The guard looked around, then leaned closer. I need you to pass a message to someone in cell block D. Lewis hesitated. Prison rules were strict. No inmate should be talking privately with staff, and no staff should be passing private messages. But once a guard breaks a rule, inmates know it. And once an inmate has a guard secret, the balance shifts. Lewis delivered the message. And after that, the guard asked again. And again. Soon, other guards started doing the same, because once one person broke the rules, others followed. MS-13 noticed. And they used it. They began mapping which guards needed money. Which guards were worried about keeping their jobs. Which guards wanted to look away just long enough for something to happen. Not for violence, but for communication. Because communication was the one thing that could grow their power without anyone noticing. Soon, MS-13 leaders inside the prison were setting up tiny command points, places where they could talk without being watched. A broom closet. A corner of the infirmary. A space behind the kitchen refrigerators. These were simple spots, but to them, they were headquarters. Meanwhile, on the outside, members waited for orders. And orders started flowing like a hidden river, where to move drugs, which cars to watch, what streets to avoid. But the prison officials didn't know the orders were coming from inside their own building. Then came a moment that changed everything. A shipment of phones came into the prison laundry by mistake. Or at least, that was the story. The phones were small and cheap. Hard to track. Hard to notice. Someone on the outside had planned it carefully. Lewis found the phones. Thomas handed them out to trusted members. They were not used for long calls. They were not used to show power. They were tools, silent, simple, almost invisible. And with these tools, MS-13 built their strongest system yet. A communication network that connected the inside to the outside faster than any guard could imagine. One night, Lewis used a phone to send a short-coded message. 3 words, no names, move. Tonight. North. That message traveled across the city in seconds. A group on the outside got ready. They did not know where the order came from. They did not know who wrote it. They only followed it. Inside the prison, Thomas nodded at Lewis. That, he said, is how an empire starts. At first, everything seemed calm. The prison days looked the same. The guards walked their rounds. The food trays slid down the metal rails. The yard echoed with voices and distant laughter. Nothing looked unusual. But behind all that calm, MS-13 grew more organized. They kept notes in their heads, not on paper. They held meetings while sweeping floors. They spoke in codes so simple they sounded like normal talk. Weeks passed. The network grew stronger. And the prison became more than a place to keep people locked away, it became a command center. But every empire, no matter how quiet, reaches a moment when someone outside notices. It happened when a string of phone calls were traced to a tower near the prison. Officials looked closer. They found patterns, short calls, hidden numbers, strange timing. They began to suspect someone inside was controlling things on the outside. Investigators moved in slowly. They walked the halls. They checked logs. They interviewed guards. They didn't know who the leader was yet, but they knew something was happening. And MS-13 knew the investigators were getting close. The pressure grew. Tension filled the air. Even the guards felt it. Some guards walked faster. Some watched the inmates more carefully. Others seemed scared to look anyone in the eyes. It all led to the night of the blackout. The night MS-13 forced the prison systems down. The night the outside world moved on their command. The night Ryan found an inmate in the control room. And right when Ryan heard the voice whisper too late, something even worse happened. From down the hallway, a heavy steel door slammed open with such force it echoed like thunder. Someone was coming. And they were not alone.